My sister forged signatures to claim the family business. She forgot one thing. The lawyer who drafted the will was my mentor. Her fraud unraveled in court, and the empire she tried to steal became the weapon that destroyed her. The first time I saw the irregularities, I was sitting alone in the office late at night. The glow of the desk lamp cast long shadows across the room, and the silence was broken only by the sound of papers rustling under my hands. I wasn't expecting to find anything unusual. I was simply reviewing routine accounts. But then a figure on the ledger caught my eye. A transaction had been authorized with my signature, except it wasn't mine. I leaned closer, tracing the ink with my finger. The strokes were similar, almost convincing, but there was something off. Too sharp in places, too careless in others. My name had been written, but not by me. My stomach tightened. Someone had forged my approval. I flipped through more documents and the pattern repeated. Decisions I had never made, contracts I had never signed, all bearing a version of my signature. The realization was immediate and chilling. Someone inside the family business was tampering with authority. The next morning I watched my sister carefully. She moved through the office with a new kind of confidence, her chin lifted, her smile edged with arrogance. When I asked about a recent deal, she brushed me off with vague words, her eyes darting away. "Don't worry about it," she said, her tone dismissive. That wasn't the sister I knew. She had grown secretive, guarded, and strangely bold. Her behavior unsettled me. She avoided direct questions, changed topics quickly, and carried herself as though she owned more than she did. I began to notice small things. Her hushed phone calls, the way she locked her office door, the smugness in her laugh when she thought no one was listening. One afternoon I ran into Mr. Harris, an old employee who had retired years ago but still visited occasionally. He leaned close, lowering his voice. "I heard your sister signed some papers in your absence," he said. "Big ones. People are talking." His words struck me like a warning bell. Documents signed without me? That wasn't just unusual, it was dangerous. I thanked him, masking my alarm, but inside my suspicion grew sharper. That evening I returned to the office after everyone had left. I opened the filing cabinets, pulling out old contracts, wills, and agreements. I compared signatures side by side, holding them under the lamp. The differences became clearer the longer I looked. My handwriting had a rhythm, a natural flow. Hers, her imitation, was stiff, forced, betraying the hand of a pretender. I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't just carelessness. This was deliberate. She was forging my name to claim authority she didn't have. The deeper I dug, the more the trail pointed directly to her. Receipts, contracts, and letters, all bearing my forged signature, all tied to decisions that benefited her. She had been weaving a web of deception, and I had walked blindly into it. I remembered moments from our childhood, when we promised to stand together, to protect the family legacy. She had always been ambitious, but I never imagined she would turn that ambition into betrayal. The realization hit hard. My sister was trying to claim the empire for herself. She wasn't just meddling with papers. She was rewriting the future of our family business. I sat back in my chair, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. But even as anger burned, a spark of resolve lit within me. He had forgotten one thing. The lawyer who drafted the will, the man who knew every detail of our inheritance, was my mentor. He had taught me everything about contracts, signatures, and the law. And if anyone could help me expose her fraud, it was him. I tucked the forged documents back into place, careful not to leave a trace of my search. My sister thought she was clever, thought her deception was airtight. But I had seen the cracks and I knew where to strike. The next day I watched her again. She walked into the office with her head high, greeting employees with a false warmth. I noticed how she lingered near the safe, how she carried folders close to her chest as if guarding secrets. I asked her casually, "Did you authorize the new deal with the suppliers?" She hesitated, then smiled too quickly. "Of course. You signed it yourself, didn't you?" Her words were a test and I caught the slip. She was trying to cover her tracks, but the lie was too obvious. I nodded, pretending to agree, but inside the fire burned hotter. She thought she could outsmart me, thought she could rewrite history with a pen and a forged name. But she underestimated me. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail. The forged signatures, the whispers from Mr. Harris, the arrogance in her smile. My mind raced with questions. How far had she gone? How many documents had she tampered with? How many lies had she told? I rose before dawn, returning to the office once more. I opened drawers, scanned files, and pieced together the fragments of her scheme. Each discovery added weight to the truth. She was building a false empire, brick by brick, signature by signature. The betrayal cut deep, but it also sharpened my resolve. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't blind. I had the knowledge, the evidence, and the connection that would turn her fraud into her downfall. As the sun rose, casting light across the office, I closed the files and locked them away. My sister thought she had won, but she had only set the stage for her own destruction. The suspicion had become discovery, and the discovery had become certainty. She had tried to steal what was never hers, but I held the weapon she could never anticipate. The truth, backed by the mentor who had taught me to see through deception. And I was ready to use it. The evidence I had gathered weighed heavily in my hands as I walked into my mentor's office. The man who had drafted the will, the one who knew every clause and condition, looked up from his desk with sharp eyes that had seen decades of deception. I laid the forged documents before him, my voice steady but my heart racing. "She's trying to take it all," I said. He studied the papers in silence, his fingers tracing the false signatures. Finally he looked at me. "She's clever but not clever enough. These won't stand in court." That was the moment I knew the battle had begun. We spent nights preparing, combing through files, gathering witnesses, and building a case strong enough to withstand her arrogance. Every detail mattered. The dates, the handwriting analysis, the testimonies of employees who had seen her sign in my absence. My mentor guided me with precision, reminding me that truth, when armed with evidence, was a weapon no lie could withstand. The day of the trial arrived. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone walls cold and imposing. I walked inside with my mentor at my side, carrying the weight of betrayal but also the strength of resolve. My sister was already there. She entered the courtroom dressed in power, her tailored suit sharp, her hair perfectly styled, her smile dripping with confidence. She carried herself like a queen, certain that her deception would hold under scrutiny. She glanced at me briefly, her eyes gleaming with defiance, as if daring me to challenge her. The judge called the room to order and the proceedings began. My sister's lawyer spoke first, painting her as the rightful heir, the visionary leader of the family business. His words were smooth, rehearsed, designed to impress. My sister sat tall, nodding along, her pride radiating from every gesture. Then it was our turn. My mentor rose, his voice calm but commanding. He began dismantling her lies piece by piece, presenting undeniable proof of forgery. He held up documents, pointing out the inconsistencies in the signatures. He called handwriting experts to testify, each one confirming that the signatures were not mine. The atmosphere shifted. The confidence in her smile began to falter. I watched her face closely. At first she maintained her composure, her lips pressed into a thin line. But as the evidence mounted, cracks appeared. Her eyes darted nervously, her hands fidgeted, her posture slumped. The smug certainty she had carried into the courtroom began to crumble. Witnesses stepped forward. Employees who had seen her sign papers in my absence, who had heard her boast about taking control. Each testimony was another blow to her facade. My mentor presented the will itself, the original document drafted years ago, untouched and unaltered. He explained every clause, every condition, every safeguard that had been put in place to prevent fraud. His words were clear, undeniable, and devastating to her case. The judge listened intently, his expression growing stern. The jury leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the evidence. The room was heavy with tension, every word echoing with consequence. My sister tried to defend herself. She stood, her voice trembling, insisting that the signatures were genuine, that the witnesses were mistaken, that the evidence was flawed. But her words rang hollow. The truth was too strong, too clear, too undeniable. I sat silently watching her unravel. The woman who had once been my sister, who had once shared my childhood dreams, now stood exposed as a fraud. Her empire of lies was collapsing before her eyes, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The final blow came when my mentor revealed a letter she had written, carelessly signed with her own hand, contradicting the forged documents. It was the proof that tied everything together, the piece of evidence that destroyed her credibility completely. Her face turned pale, her confidence shattered. She looked at me then, her eyes wide with desperation as if pleading for mercy. But I gave her none. The judge delivered the verdict with firm authority. The evidence is clear. The claim is fraudulent. The estate remains with its rightful heir. The words echoed through the courtroom, final and unshakable. My sister's fraud had unraveled, and the empire she sought to steal had become the very weapon that destroyed her. She sank into her chair, her head bowed, her pride broken. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the weight of her downfall heavy in the air. I sat still, my heart pounding but my face calm. I had won, not through anger, not through vengeance, but through truth. As we left the courtroom, my mentor placed a hand on my shoulder. "You stood strong," he said. "She thought she could rewrite the law, but the law stood with you." Outside, the sun shone brightly, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged inside. I breathed deeply, feeling the weight lift from my chest. The battle was over and the truth had prevailed. But as I walked away, I knew the scars would remain. Betrayal leaves marks that no verdict can erase. Still, I carried myself with dignity, knowing that I had faced her deception head-on and emerged stronger. The courtroom had been the battlefield and the truth had been my weapon. And in the end, it was her own greed that destroyed her. The courthouse doors closed behind me, but the echoes of the verdict followed me home. My sister's fraud had been laid bare for the world to see, and though justice had been served, the air around me felt heavy. The family was fractured, the trust we once shared shattered into pieces too sharp to mend. I returned to the office the next morning, the place that had been at the center of her deception. The employees greeted me with cautious eyes, unsure of how to act after the storm that had passed. Some whispered in corners, others avoided my gaze, but I understood their hesitation. They had seen the cracks in our family and they feared the empire might crumble with it. I stood before them, my voice steady. "We will rebuild," I said. "Not with lies, not with greed, but with loyalty and truth." The words carried through the room and slowly the tension eased. Heads lifted, shoulders straightened, and I saw the spark of trust begin to return. But before I could truly move forward, I knew I had to face her. I found my sister alone in her house, the arrogance gone, replaced by silence. She sat in the living room, her hands folded tightly, her eyes hollow. For a moment I almost saw the girl I grew up with. The sister who once laughed with me, who once promised we would protect each other. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone consumed by ambition. I sat across from her, the air thick with unspoken words. "You betrayed me," I said quietly, my tone firm but calm. "You betrayed the family, the business, everything we built together." She looked at me, her lips trembling. "I thought I deserved it," she whispered. "I thought I could take it and make it mine." I shook my head. "You didn't deserve it. You tried to steal it. And now you face the consequences of your greed." Her eyes filled with regret, but I didn't let her words soften me. I wasn't there to comfort her. I was there to make her face the weight of what she had done. "You lost more than the business," I continued. "You lost trust. You lost respect. And those are things you will never get back." She lowered her gaze, silent. I stood, leaving her with her emptiness. I didn't shout, I didn't rage. My dignity was my weapon and I carried it with me as I walked away. Back at the office, I poured my energy into rebuilding. The business, once nearly stolen, became my shield and my reminder that truth always outlasts deception. I met with employees one by one, listening to their concerns, assuring them that stability would return. I opened the books, showing transparency, proving that nothing would be hidden again. Slowly trust grew. The whispers faded, replaced by determination. The empire began to stand stronger, free from her shadow. Family gatherings were different now. Some relatives sided with her, unable to accept the truth. Others stood with me, recognizing the betrayal for what it was. The fracture was painful, but I chose dignity over bitterness. I didn't waste energy on revenge. I focused on strength, on rebuilding, on proving that loyalty mattered more than ambition. One evening I walked through the office alone, the lights dim, the silence comforting. I paused at the desk where I had first discovered the forged signatures. The memory was sharp, but instead of anger I felt resilience. That moment had changed everything, but it had also taught me the power of vigilance, the importance of trust, and the strength of standing firm. I thought of my mentor, the lawyer who had guided me through the storm. His words echoed in my mind, truth is your weapon. He had been right. And now the business was not just an empire, it was a testament to survival. I rebuilt relationships with clients, assuring them that integrity would guide every decision. I visited old partners, shaking hands, promising transparency. Each step was a reminder that deception could wound but it could not destroy. At home I reflected often. Betrayal had cut deeply, but it had also carved strength into me. I had faced lies, exposed fraud, and reclaimed what was mine. And though scars remained, they were marks of resilience, not weakness. One night I stood by the window watching the city lights flicker. I thought of my sister alone in her silence, and I felt no hatred. Only clarity. She had chosen greed, and greed had destroyed her. I had chosen truth, and truth had carried me forward. The story closed not with bitterness but with resolve. Betrayal may wound deeply, but it teaches resilience. It teaches vigilance. It teaches the value of loyalty. I walked forward knowing that my life would never again be defined by her lies. The empire stood strong, the family business reclaimed, and my dignity intact. And in the quiet of that moment I understood. Strength is not in revenge but in resilience. And resilience is what carried me through.